Narrative killed, ticket punched. The Atlanta Braves are headed back to the World Series for the first time in 22 years, finishing off the Dodgers in 6 games with a 4-2 win Saturday night. You're watching Battery Power. I'm Cory McCartney along with Grant McAuley. And Grant, all the hurdles, all the obstacles, all the challenges this team overcame, and it's doing something no Atlanta Braves team has done in a generation.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think about what an incredible and unforgettable night at Truist Park as the Braves did indeed punch their ticket to the World Series. And it's been a minute since we've been talking about the Braves and the World Series and getting there after what felt like, I don't want to say an annual rite of passage, but they were getting there quite a bit for a while in the 1990s. And you just had that feeling like you were going to get another opportunity. It'd be right around the corner. But there were a ton of obstacles for the Braves to get over, not the least of which were the injuries. But of course, we're talking about a very inconsistent team throughout the first half of the season and before the trade deadline. I went back and looked because I was very curious. I knew that the playoff odds for the Braves before the deadline, according to Fangraphs, were 7.7%. Not exactly glowing numbers that got you thinking about October baseball. Their odds of winning the NLCS prior to the trade deadline, 1.3%. But I don't know if there's any better way to punctuate how great that trade deadline was than the NLCS MVP Eddie Rosario, who did it again. Huge 3-run homer to help the Braves win Game 6. And we're sitting here talking about a World Series-bound Atlanta Braves team that some people were saying should have been selling at that very trade deadline, Corey. So, man, we have come full circle and then some, and we have so much to talk about on this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we could take this thing, from a 10,000-foot view and think about the Jason Hayward trade and all that it's been overcome, just in getting the pieces to get to this point. But I think there's going to be plenty of time for that. So I think we need to revel in what we just saw unfold at Truist Park on Saturday night. And you mentioned it. I mean, every conversation about this National League Championship Series from here until eternity will be filled with one name above any other, and that's Eddie Rosario. I mean, legends, they tell us, Grant, they're made in October. Rosario, I mean, one of the great series of any hitter ever. A mammoth 3-run home run, as you mentioned, a go-ahead blast in the fourth, something, that comes after a 4-hit, 2-home-run game, a walk-off hit in Game 1. He's, of course, your series MVP, as you mentioned, ties the record of 14 hits in a single series, along with Marco Scudero, Kevin Youkilis, Albert Pujols, and Hideki Matsui. Becomes the first player in LCS history with three homers, a triple, and a double. Hit a whopping .560 in this series. Grant, we are all right now bowing at the Tao of Eddie.
It's unbelievable. And again, this is a guy who not only was he not on the team at the trade deadline, but you weren't going to be able to plug him in for about a month or so after that. I felt like, those moves that were made at the deadline, yeah, you needed that instant help. You had already gotten Jock Peterson, but you needed more outfield firepower. You needed to try to do what you could to create a lineup that was going to give the Braves the runs they were going to need to score. But Eddie Rosario was just a guy that was kind of given away by the Cleveland Indians. And I would go back to what we were talking about a few days ago. This was a trade that was made largely because you could not make trades during that waiver period after the deadline. Now, that's no longer a thing to have guys eligible for the postseason. So you kind of got Eddie Rosario as almost this little insurance policy that just in case we didn't get enough, maybe this guy, he's like travel insurance, and he's going to be booking a trip to the World Series as a result. But let's not sell the guy short. You mentioned the stuff of legend in the NLCS, the stuff of legend for a postseason career. He just seemed to be the right guy at the right place at the right time over and over and over again for the Braves with the 4-hit games, nearly hitting for the cycle again. And then, of course, that 3-run homer, his biggest hit of the series. He saved it for last. But I do want to throw this in here, not to take anything away from what Eddie Rosario did in his very deserving NLCS MVP award. I don't think I was alone in saying this, and Brian Snitker even mentioned it after the Game 6 was over and the celebration kind of calmed down long enough for them to talk to the press. Maybe cutting off a little piece of that trophy for Tyler Matzek, because I can tell you, I've been to a lot of ballparks, seen a lot of games, and what he was doing to the Dodgers in Game 6 was flat out the stuff of legend and pretty unfair on top of that. That was an electric feeling, and that was what he did for the Braves that entire series, the entire postseason. You talk about legends being born in October. Tyler Matzek is just an incredible story, and it wrote another amazing chapter in helping the Braves to keep the Dodgers bats down late. Rosario was getting the big hits. Matzek, though, getting some very big outs for his club, but there were a lot of heroes in the series and to make this thing happen.
Yeah, I want to get into Matzek in a second, but I almost wonder, with Rosario, if the trade deadline isn't set up like it is, and we still have the waiver wire, he may not even be a Brave, because if the Indians would have got him back and he would have shown, that he could play again, who knows how that thing even sets up. So, I mean, there's the potential that under the old system, Eddie Rosario is not even ever getting into a Braves uniform. But let's get into the decision that led to Rosario's homer. Travis d'Arnaud, works a 2-out walk against Walker Buehler. Brian Snitker had opted to lift Ian Anderson in the 4th inning after just 66 pitches. I mean, he was looking pretty sharp. 3 hits, 1 run allowed. In steps Adrianza, ropes a double down the line. It's a moment and a move that I think might have been the biggest of the night, because there was no tap-on runs that came after that. 3 innings later, the Dodgers get their second run off A.J. Pollock's double. That wasn't enough because of Adrianza's pitch hit magic, and Rosario, of course, follows the blast. But if Brian Snitker doesn't pull that lever, and he doesn't pull it at that moment, we may be talking about a Game 7 right now. So, obviously any manager is going to take his criticism. He was open to criticism when he pulls out a pitcher at that point, but man, he absolutely pulled the right lever at the right time.
Yeah, and we talk about, and this goes for every one of the 30 major league managers, and then the ones that replace the guys who don't make it through the season, and so on and so forth. It's an endless cycle of being able to manage in hindsight. And I know that we've said, I don't know if I would do that, or that wasn't the move that paid off the way that it needed to. And no manager's decisions are going to be perfect. Now I'm going to take all the disclaimers I just told you, and I'm going to put them over to the side and tell you that every once in a while, you need to look at it and say, wow, the manager made a decision that changed the course of the game, and you had to go with whatever criteria, whether that was an instinct, whether it was a matchup, whether it was a feeling that, hey, we might not get another chance. Maybe it's some of all of those things, but whatever the case, it wasn't about getting Adrianza to the plate. It was about extending that inning and trying to get back to the top of the order, get Eddie Rosario up there, get Freddie Freeman up there. If things go even better, maybe you get Ozzie Albies up there and you start pushing all the way through the lineup. It just felt like a pivot point in that game where if you press the button right then, that was going to give you the result that you wanted, or at least that was the hopes, and that was exactly how it worked out for the Atlanta Braves. The Adrianza double was huge. Getting Eddie Rosario back up there and getting those runs on the board, that was worth, I think, the trade of another inning of Ian Anderson, because even though he looked much better in Game 6, you had a feeling like 5 was probably about as far as they were going to push him anyway, and you were hoping the bullpen that's done so well for you by and large throughout the entire postseason would be able to continue doing what it's doing. And it's a little bit easier to have faith in that group when you got, say, a Tyler Matzek or, an AJ Minter who came in and was absolutely lights out as well. That was an example. Those moves were an example of things going right for a manager who picked the right time to deploy a pinch hitter, make a difficult decision to take a pitcher out that, if you go back and look at the way things have been traditionally speaking, maybe that's a part of the postseason that people don't like so much anymore, is you don't get the starter going deep into the ball game and you got to go to this battle of bullpens. But when it works out, it's a beautiful thing. I would kind of file it under like the shift. It works so many times that you don't think about it. The time it doesn't work, you're either infuriated if it goes against you, or you're thrilled that the other team decided to shift when you do get that big hit and your guy gets that, gets on base and all of those things. So to make a long story short, it's difficult to make these decisions. You're doing it in the moment. And in that moment, Brian Snitker, for whatever criteria, whatever feeling he had, he definitely made the call that helped the Braves advance to the World Series.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned the bullpen efforts there. I mean, AJ Minter was fantastic. Again, 5 strikeouts and 2 scoreless innings. And, of course, it ends with Will Smith slamming the door for his 4th save of the season, the postseason, excuse me. In between, I mean, we had something fantastic, and we had something that was a little bit troubling. Luke Jackson, who last time out, of course, gave up the home run to Cody Bellinger, allowed 2 doubles and a walk, and left with just a mess, not even getting an out in the inning. But Tyler Matzek, I mean, you mentioned the effort of this guy. The most valuable pitcher on this staff in these playoffs, delivered yet again. Fans Pujols, Steven Souza Jr., Mookie Betts to end the 7th with runners at 2nd and 3rd. Makes it 4 straight Ks with Corey Seager, and then a pair of ground outs. Just absolutely dominant. I mean, I know there's going to be, we all know Tyler Matzek's story, and it's bubbling to the surface here in this postseason from a national perspective. I would anticipate you're going to hear a whole lot about Tyler Matzek going into this World Series and throughout, because we know how big this bullpen's going to be. It's been massive, those lefties coming out there and just getting the work done. But man, 2 runs on his ledger this postseason that really weren't even on him. Those came after Luke Jackson comes in the mound in game 2. He has been absolutely everything in this postseason for this Braves bullpen.
And somebody was going to have to be, and it was going to have to be more than one somebody, and it has been by and large. But the Tyler Matzek story, I remember going through it last year when he made the team, came up and started throwing the kind of innings that we saw last night. And then, of course, going into the postseason, he was also one of their big weapons in 2020. It was already a good story. It has now become a great story because this guy has been nails for the Braves in the biggest spots that they've needed him to help solidify that bullpen and get it to Will Smith to close it out. He hasn't been alone in doing this, but when the Braves have asked, Tyler Matzek has answered that call time and time again. He has pitched in all but 1 game this postseason. And again, I know it's weird to say, hey, the setup guy could be your NLCS MVP, but if you go back and watch these games and watch this series, and you think about a team like the LA Dodgers, and let's not take anything away from them, no matter who they've lost, no matter who they don't have, they're also a team that has an embarrassment of riches and brought out a lineup that could certainly play with anybody all year long into the NLCS. And Matzek was the guy handed the ball and said, hey, get us out of this mess, or hey, don't let these guys get up, get any momentum going. And he did it time and time again. It's an incredible story of a guy who was practically out of baseball. You never knew. He probably didn't know at some point if he was going to pitch again, especially not at the major league level. And he finds his way through independent ball. He gets over his throwing problems that were plaguing him in Colorado and finds a spot in the Braves bullpen. So as far as deft maneuvers are concerned and building a team, guys come from all kinds of different places. We focused a lot on the trade deadline. Let's focus a little bit on a minor league signing that turned out to be a major league plus for the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, we all know in this age, high leverage outs are what matters, and they get no higher leverage than what we've seen out of Tyler Matzek in this postseason time and time again. And we're going to get into this deeper in our next episode, but the World Series matchup, you've got the Braves, you've got the Astros, you've got some great storylines, 2 teams that haven't seen each other stunningly since 2017. Due to some, just the quirks of scheduling, obviously, the shortened season last year. It's the deepest and highest scoring offense in baseball with Houston. Has 6 guys hitting 23% or higher above league average. 4 of those guys have hit 26 or more home runs. They've got a Braves team going against them that has 5 guys with 27 or more home runs. Granted, offense, this figures to be an absolute offensive showcase.
It feels like it should be. The Astros, of course, have found a way to get themselves back to the promised land, and I think it's largely on the backs of their offense. They've had guys on their pitching staff that have stepped up. They were just able to dispatch a great hitting team in the Boston Red Sox and do so in 6 games to get back to the World Series. And regardless of your feelings about the Astros of a few years ago and what might be lingering there, you got to focus on this team here in 2021 and beating that group and finding a way to contain some of the talented players that they have. And also find a way to get your offense rolling if you're the Atlanta Braves. The Astros pitching staff, I think, has had some storms to weather in its own right. They did all that they did against the Boston Red Sox without Lance McCullers to lean on, which is a pretty big loss for them. But I don't want to focus on who's not playing. Let's just focus on the fact that 2 teams that got hot at the right time have rolled themselves into October and found themselves in the last and final round to determine who's going to be the champion of baseball for 2021. If you told me the Atlanta Braves were going to be there 2 months ago, I would have needed to know what were you thinking and why exactly would you be saying that? Because this is a club that couldn't get above 500 for good until the second week of August. The Astros, maybe a little bit different road to the World Series. They, of course, have a lot of storylines and narratives that are built into that we'll get into, but it's going to be a big challenge. It could be a big hitting World Series, or it could be one of those where the surprising pitching matchups continue to be part of postseason lore. We've seen a lot of that, but I think the Braves up to the task of matching up with this team. It's going to be exciting to dig into this series next time.
Yeah, obviously also there's Eddie Rosario against Jordan Alvarez, who might be the only guy that can speak his language when it comes to hitting right now. Brian Snitker against his son Troy, who's the Astros hitting coach. And of course, Houston manager Dusty Baker against the team that he used to play for. There's just, it's just on and on and on with these storylines. And it all gets started Tuesday in Houston. The Braves will get games 3, 4, and potentially next 5 if it goes that far next weekend in Atlanta. So it's Granted, at times seemed improbable, impossible, but for the first time since the days of Glavine, Maddox, Smoltz, Chipper, Andrew, and Bobby, the Braves are back in the World Series. Go along for the ride with us here on Battery Power. So get to the Talking Chop YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications so you get every new episode. He's Grant McAuley. I'm Cory McCartney. Get hyped and stay hyped, Braves country. You're going to the World Series. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.